Muted.
We'll get started in just a short bit. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for the Firm of the Future webinar series. This month, we're talking about value pricing. And today, we're going to be talking about the 10 steps to value pricing. A little bit of housekeeping to get us started. First, there's the control panel. If you're not familiar with GoToWebinar, it's best to close down other applications that might be using your bandwidth, like Skype and email. You can ask questions as we go through the webinar today. I've got Stuart on the line here to help me out in answering those. I will provide some time at the end to answer questions. We do have a lot of content to go through today, so we're going to go through relatively quickly on a few things on the housekeeping. As I mentioned before, the February content series on value pricing. Today we're talking about the 10 steps to value pricing. On the firmofthefuture.com website, later in the month you'll be able to go to the site and be able to pull down bundling and pricing strategies, a deep dive on that, a deep dive on the value conversation, and also a panel discussion around the value pricing journey and what to expect on it. So some great stuff coming to you. Check the firmofthefuture.com for those things to become available. For those of you that were at QuickBooks Connect, or if you've been part of the Firm of the Future, there's three different tracks. Today we're focusing on Become a Trusted Advisor, and that's where value pricing is sitting within that. Who am I? Who's the guy on the other side of the microphone here? My name is Ian Bateson. I work for Carbon. You can learn about us at carbonhq.com. I'm the Vice President of Product Marketing. My email is up there as well. Feel free to email me questions regarding Carbon, questions regarding value pricing, or different things that come up. There's a little bit of a bio down there for me before. I've been in the industry for over 15 years, in tech for almost 25. I did work at Intuit at one point where I was head of the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program, so some of you might be familiar with me from that. A little bit about Carbon, and we'll move on, Carbon is the place to collaborate with your team and look after your clients. Just to give you a quick little rundown what it is, it helps you in terms of your email communications to triage it, collaborate with your team by working together. It manages all the work in one place, timelines that bring full context to the conversations and the work that needs to be done, contacts to manage them and be able to reach out, checklists to get work done, to-dos to manage things that happen each day, and the ability to search and find things at a moment notice. If you want to learn more about Carbon, again, go to carbonhq.com. This is not a demo on Carbon or a conversation about it. What it is today is about the 10 steps to value pricing. And what I first want to do and bring people up to speed on is a little bit of just a primer on exactly what is pricing overall, because there is some misconceptions of what value pricing is compared to not necessarily hourly billing, because I think we're very familiar with that, but there are different variations of pricing overall. So the 5 main types are hourly-based billing, cost plus pricing, fixed pricing, value billing, and value pricing. So what are each one of those? All of you are quite familiar with hourly-based billing, so I'm not going to go on to that, but that's basically the set rate per hour for services that you provide, usually paid post. The second is really cost plus pricing, which is the cost to perform a service plus the markup that's necessary ultimately to make a profit. Now, fixed pricing is what a lot of folks are doing today and what a lot of folks have migrated to. And again, that's a consistent set cost for a product or service. Might be subscription-based in terms of a monthly ongoing payment that you're going to pay for whatever service allocation that you as a small business owner or an individual might be asking from your trusted advisor. Now, value billing is not value pricing. It's a bit different because it's billing on the perceived value or service after completion of the service. So definitely a distinction there. It's after versus before. Where value pricing is the pricing for before the service is actually performed and based on the customer's perceived value of what that service is going to be. And so that's cost plus markup plus the perception of value on top of that. And so the difference between fixed pricing and value pricing, which is why I put them up there, is fixed pricing. It might be a set fee. Let's say it's $500 per month, regardless of customers that you would meet along the way. Where value pricing might start at a situation of $500 a month, but you're going to change the pricing based on that customer's perceived value. So each customer would get a different price that they would be paying before the service is actually, or negotiate on before the service is actually been rendered. So hopefully that gets everyone up to speed on just the basics of that. Also, for those of you that are using hourly billing and looking to go to value pricing, or even going to fixed fees, because again, this conversation is really not just about value pricing, but also on migrating to fixed fees. A little bit of the shortfalls of the hourly billing model, and then also some of the benefits. So the shortfalls are, it's something that we've always done. From a professional perspective, those of you who've come up through the ranks and been here and doing it for years and decades, it's just what we did. Secondly, the biggest issue with hourly billing is the faster you work, the more proficient you get, doesn't translate into more profit or more earnings. What it does is it actually translates to less compensation and the more customers that you're going to have in. So there's a disincentive to actually be doing things faster and better for the clients that you serve. The next thing is when you're doing hourly billing, what happens inherently is the prospects or the customers or clients that are coming in the door that are evaluating whether or not they want to go with you. The first thing or one of the main drivers that happens is when you bring out an hourly rate. If I say it's $75 per hour, then they're going to go ahead and shop around to find the cheapest rate versus understanding the value that you're able to bring. So the conversation goes down to ultimately getting the cheapest price than it is about finding the best person to work with them. It's difficult when trying to raise rates. Typically, you can only do them once a year. They're going to be actually, somewhat anchored by what you currently are doing today, and it's a very difficult conversation. Your skills that you develop along the way don't translate to being paid more for those skills. So again, if you're a specialist, which again, always talk about moving to a niche or a focus because you can ultimately get better profits. That doesn't translate to more value for yourself and more profits for yourself. And ultimately, that constrains you in terms of your revenues and your profits. Now, on the flip side of that, the benefits of value pricing that we have here on the screen here are this removes that constraint of time on profits. Again, because you're able to focus, provide more, and be more strategic, have better insights than the folks that they might be evaluating otherwise, you're able to benefit from that extra hard work that you've done. It incentivizes all to improve. Again, we're talking about putting up the price before the actual work is being done, and so it puts a scenario of collaborating together to get to the outcome of the goal that we're setting off to do, as well as if I can do it faster, you receive it quicker, you're able to do what you want if you're the small business owner. It improves the ability to track better talent. What that's meant is when you're working in an hourly model, you're working on a time clock. That time clock can really make it feel mundane. It can really feel, in terms of when you're looking at utilization and realization numbers, it's a drag in terms of motivation and doing the right thing for the client, right thing for the organization, and the incentives aren't there to necessarily be doing it again faster. It's about doing it in terms of making sure that I'm full and fully utilized. The best thing about value pricing is everything is talked about up front. There's no surprises at the end of the day when ultimately something ultimately takes longer and you're not updating the client. It's very reactive in an hourly-based billing versus it's proactive with value pricing. And again, it eliminates the barriers to collaboration because everyone's incentivized to work together. So I know that might be a little bit of a refresher for some folks, but again, it's a good starting point before we actually get to those 10 steps. I didn't mention this at the beginning, by the way, as we transition to the next step. This presentation today is for CPE credit. You need to hold tight. We're going to have a surprise keyword somewhere along the discussion today, and then you can answer with that keyword at the end of the actual webinar. So with that being said, let's get into the 10 steps to value pricing. And what I've done is I've actually broken it down into some phases or some broader sort of transition steps that we're going to go through as we evaluate this. And that first area is we're going to talk a bit here in a second about the research. It's not, value pricing isn't something that you just wake up one day. You might, but you wake up one day and say, I'm just going to go do this, and then you instantly are doing it that day. you want to have a game plan. You want to understand, why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, and put that in place before you actually put pen to paper or take that first step forward. The next phase really is around the setup. We're going to talk about packages, we're going to talk about pricing, even change management. How do you put all that into place in order to get to that next point along the journey? Then it's actually got to put it in practice, and you're going to do it with that first client. And ultimately, what are you trying to set up to learn? What's the best way to do that? What are the difficult parts within that? Which then goes to the learning journey. Even if you've been doing value pricing for years, it never stops in terms of learning, because that learning helps you fine-tune what is the right price that a customer is going to be willing and happy to pay for the services that you're going to provide. And that goes back to that last step, which is iterating on that and going back and reevaluating what did you set up, how did you put it in practice. And again, that cycle of constantly improving this so that you're able to ultimately be able to do the right thing for the client, right thing for the business, and ultimately have a big smile on your face at the end of each project, as well as the client, because they're going to have a big smile on their face too. All right, so let's get started, and let's jump into step number one. No surprise based on what was the header on the last one, which was do your research. And I've got some great places for you to go. So first of all, if you go to the Firm of the Future site, you'll see Ron Baker, his image is up there. And he's got some talks and he's got some content for you and review. Go read a book by Ron Baker. He is a little bit of the forefather of that in the accounting industry. Pricing on Purpose was one of the first books that I would recommend. He's also got Implementing Value Pricing. Another book, I would start with the Pricing on Purpose. You can go to Amazon, find it there. But it's a good holistic primer on the theoretical side of things, as well as the understanding of how that comes together in the context of doing it with the clients that you serve and the small business owners and the like. My personal favorite is go to Google, search The Value of Puppies by Jason Bloomer. His last name is B-L-U-M-E-R. And he did this for a TED Talk that I was a part of a couple years ago. And he simplified value pricing. And the video is great because he's talking to, I believe it is 7-year-olds, and explaining the concept end to end. And it was a really creative way to it. It is the best 16 minutes you can use in terms of getting up to speed on value pricing and understanding the theoretical side of it, and then how it goes into play. So again, Value of Puppies by Jason Bloomer, good way to go. Next one is ask your mentors and peers. While you may be in your office and it may be just you and your coworkers, there's different networks and different places that you go to get information. It may be, again, being on this webinar. It may be folks across the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program. It may be LinkedIn groups. It may just be local networking groups that you're working within, maybe a meetup group. But ask others who have gone down this journey before what they did, what they learned, and what they would suggest for you to do along each step. Have someone with you that you can bounce off ideas, bounce off thoughts, so that you're able to have the best calculated approach that you can. If you don't have that, ask your spouse. Ask somebody that's close to you that can give you, a realistic view and hopefully be able to give you some guidance on where to go. Another good place to go is review the websites of others. Go look at those people who have done it real well. So, for instance, they're part of the Firm of the Future. They've identified 20 top firms that are really exemplifying some of the progressive aspects of the industry. Go look at their websites. Understand why they did what they did, and decompose what they're presenting and how they're presenting it. And it can give you some great ideas about how maybe you want to do that as well. Again, go to other people through the QuickBooks Pro Advisor program and just look at what others have done. It'll give you some inspiration. And the last one here is continue watching this webinar. The first part of the journey is really taking that first step forward, and congratulations, all of you on the call today have done that. And so this is part of your research. So this is a good primer for where you get to go. And again, we're going to be posting up some additional pieces or subject matter on pricing and bundling and the value conversation on Firm of the Future site here over the month of January, or sorry, month of February. So, step one, do your research. Step two is really to develop a plan. And again, having an understanding of how it all is going to come together and understanding how you're going to get there is really critical, because it's not just you doing it, it's the entire practice. And you want to make sure that you understand what is the goal that you're trying to achieve, the time frame you're trying to do it, where you need to go to learn, and ultimately who you need to bring along the way to be successful. So I broke it down into these particular pieces. The first one here is determine your why. Why are you doing this? What is your end goal? Are you trying to ultimately get more value from each client so that you can do more upsell and cross-sell from your existing client base versus having to go out and get new clients? Are you trying to simplify your product offerings and ultimately get more value from that so you can bring on more talent, find better talent, ultimately maybe be more focused on what your services are? What are you ultimately trying to achieve, and why does this fit within that particular focus and goal over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever the time frame might be? And when you've determined that, it's always best to write it down. Writing it down keeps you honest. Writing it down allows you to go back and review it. Writing it down also lets you point to it with all those that are in the practice with you, so everyone is able to remember and remind themselves of why are we going through this particular effort, this particular project, and ultimately what are we trying to get on the outset of that. And the next thing with that is really in terms of your goals is to ultimately lock down what the timing is as well. I've used this model before. It's called the OGSM model, and what that stands for is objectives and goals, strategies and measures. And what that means is to objectives, goals are the measures that are defining the objectives you're trying to get to. The strategies are the tactical ways you're going to get there, and the measures are the definition of what each strategy should be delivering in terms of an outcome. So you don't necessarily have to go down that formal of a path, but again, having a good sense of what you're trying to achieve and when you're trying to achieve it will help guide you in terms of what you need to do and when. The next piece is really identify who's going to drive this. Who's going to be the project driver for value pricing? Who is going to be the one carrying the torch and making sure that we're going to get to those goals underneath that time frame? And again, a model that I used it at Intuit, I've used elsewhere, is called the DAISY model. What that means is there's a driver, there's an approver, people who are consulted, and there's people who are informed. So there's one driver, there's one approver. Those people who are involved in the project and consults, and those people need to understand or know what's going on, are informed. Everybody in the practice would be informed, and again, you need to denote who the other people are on the other spots. Most likely, you are the approver. You may also be the driver. But again, having one person who owns and carries the torch is going to help you get to the best results overall. Again, these are good, just project management tips overall. The next one is to think about change management. We're going to come back to the change management component and talk about that in more detail. But you want to have a good understanding of how are you going to ultimately get not just yourself, but your coworkers, your partners, and so forth across the line to be able to do this as well. It really just takes one person to ultimately buck the trend, or to ultimately not go down the value pricing bandwagon, to ultimately get other people to take the easy way out. And again, that's a disservice to what you're trying to do on the goals, and ultimately it's really going to hurt in terms of profits and the ability to be able to best serve your clients overall. So you want to have a good understanding of what's it going to take to actually get this across the line with everybody involved. The next piece here is really around picking the first few clients, or having an understanding of who you're going to pick. Now, with value pricing, again, it is a bit uncharted territory for some. So there's two ways to go down thinking about where you might want to go. It might just be a brand new client. There's no context, there's no history, and you can ultimately try it out and see what the reaction is going to be, gauge how that engagement went in terms of, did you price it right? Was the bundles, did they make sense, and so forth. And so a lot of folks will move to value pricing, put their new clients and keep their existing clients on what they currently do today and transition them over time. Other folks have been successful with going after clients who are non-complex or simple. Current customers that they have, that they ultimately are doing things in a routine fashion anyways. They've had a good relationship over time, and they have a conversation, say, look, we're going to change to this model. It's going to ultimately, it's going to balance out your payment stream to us, so you're not paying it all in one lump sum. We're going to spread it across the full year, pay in monthly installments. That gives you some good consistency and understanding of your cash flow. Ultimately might give you a benefit for not having to pay it all at this moment in time. And so you utilize those customers that are simple in nature to be able to understand how to have the value conversation, how to ultimately put this into practice. There's a last one I didn't put up there, which is clients that you plan to fire. This has been successful for some folks, it's not as successful for all, but you're going to be getting rid of the clients anyways. Maybe the reason why that engagement wasn't working was because of the pricing models, the service model, the inability to be proactive, and so maybe mixing this up and utilizing this as a learning opportunity will ultimately provide the way for you to take that next step forward. So those are some different ways of thinking about it, but you need to figure out which one of those you want to go down. The last one here is, if you're doing value pricing, you really need to get comfortable with sales and marketing, because you really need to be able to have, again, that value conversation we're going to talk about a little bit later, and be able to ultimately articulate why you're the best for the job that needs to be done, and why there's this value associated, and how that value is appropriate for what they need. For those who are less comfortable with the sales and marketing, this is where I would say, fixed fees are the easier or first step to go before going down a true value pricing model. And again, that's for folks, again, if you're not as comfortable with the sales and marketing, that's where you've got, an upfront fixed fee that you're generally doing for a service, for a set service package. And again, you can present that and ultimately not have to worry about reading the customer and the like. But again, if you're trying to do value pricing, again, it's trying to price based on the customer's perceived value of what they're going to be receiving from what you're providing. So that is step 2 in terms of developing a plan. Let's go now to step 3. And quick little stop here along the path. This is the CPE keyword of the day. Again, you're going to need this keyword, and the keyword is Australia. Interesting enough, Carbon, we have an office in Sydney, Australia, and also one in Melbourne, so we're quite familiar with Australia. But this keyword you're going to need at the end when I give the polling question for the CPE. So again, make sure you track this down for those of you that need a little bit more coffee, and hopefully I'm not monotone. CPE keyword today is Australia. Again, last time, Australia is the CPE keyword that you're going to have at the end. All right. Let's get moving now to step 3. Create the bundled packages. So this is where we're transitioning from that research side and ultimately into the setup phase of value pricing. And the packages and the creating the bundle packages is the way to be able to articulate what you're doing to the customer and have them help you understand what they need, because a lot of times they really don't know. They're coming at you with, here's my problem, I know what I want, here's ultimately what I want you to give me. But when you scratch under the surface, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And frankly, a lot of small businesses need to be involved a lot more with their accounting professional in order to move their business forward. They really need to have a trusted advisor along their side. So how do you create these bundled packages? And the first thing is again, you'll see that on bullet number 4, but there's a power of 3 that we're going to see not only in step 3, but in step 4 and also later as well. And the reason why the power of 3 is important is it's really easy for someone to process when given a set of options that are 3 in amount to be able to evaluate which one is the most accurate for what they need. And so it's simpler to digest. It's also, when you're dealing with difficult problems, if you're able to break it into 3s, you're able to get to what the middle or the average that you want to be able to leverage. And again, we're going to see that in pricing. So don't forget the power of 3. Now, in creating bundle packages, the first place to start is to really make an exhaustive list. Because what you're going to do from that exhaustive list is you're going to narrow it down, simplify it, and then ultimately create it to something that's digestible into these packages. And so you can just go back and look at the engagements that you're doing today and start writing down what services are you doing and for whom. And then you can go back even further engagements and look at, again, what are the different projects that we've been doing and for the customers, the typical customers or clients that we want to serve. And again, the more detailed you go, the more you're going to be able to understand exactly what are you truly providing. And again, if you're new and you're basically taking clients from a whole wide variety of industries and different types of functions, this can be quite a large list. But it also helps you to understand and take a step back and say, okay, should I really be providing all these various services across this client base, or do I need to be a little bit more focused? And again, these packages can help you be more focused going forward. And so again, spend the time and document again exactly what are those services you provide. And again, if you need some context of what others have done, this is where you go look at their websites and see kind of what services that they're communicating and talking to in terms of to the prospects that are out there that they're trying to serve. Now, once you have this detailed or exhaustive list of all your services, you now want to go on to the other side of that equation and figure out what is the bare minimum of services that you need to provide to have a meaningful and successful engagement. And so this could be looking at the least common denominator across the current clients that you have or the recent clients that you have. But probably it needs to be even more. That's probably looking too thin. You might want to look at that just a little bit more aggressively in terms of there's probably some clients that you're servicing today that aren't doing enough, and it's probably not acceptable that you're doing that little for them because it takes time away from your best clients. It also takes time away to have capacity to be able to bring on new clients if they were to come in, if you were able to get a brand new client that was going to be super profitable or exciting or interesting overall. And so now you've got this exhaustive list, you've pared it down to the bare minimum, and what you're going to do now is you're going to look at the middle point between that and look at, okay, what is the average services I need to provide, or what are the average services I'm providing today across the clients that I have? Again, it's not the minimum, it's not the full set, but what typically am I doing right now? And then when you evaluate that and you look at what that particular set is, look at it from a different lens and say, well, ideally, what should I be providing on an average basis to the client? So maybe, in terms of just looking at this broadly, let's say I'm an outsourced bookkeeper, I'm providing payroll, I'm providing bookkeeping, I'm providing IT setup and services and the like. Well, actually, a lot of times I'm doing advisory services, and I'm doing it for some, and I'm not doing it for others, but that's where I'm really providing some meaningful value, and I'm getting a lot of appreciation, a lot of really good client satisfaction around that, so maybe that should be part of my middle option. And so that's, again, why I make the distinction between average and ideal. Now, what's happened here is with those first three that we've talked about is we've inherently created three options. And there's two ways to look at that. The first one is the GBB, which I call the good, better, best model. And again, that's not necessarily the minimum to serve. It's a bit above that. Better, again, sits between best, and again, the best may not be the exhaustive list. It's maybe a paring down from the exhaustive list because, again, you're trying to package. It's not the full a la carte menu. Versus the MTO model is the minimum, typical, and the full collective set, or that a la carte menu at the end. And so that's really kind of giving that full breadth of what we've just done before. Again, this is what we do in a bare minimum to serve you. This is what we could do, the full collective set, and then typically this is what people do in the middle. And the reason why you're creating three packages is because when you present that to somebody, they immediately will evaluate the middle package. They will then see that if they go down on the more cheap route or less servicing route, what are they giving up? And then they look at the best package to figure out what they're missing. And it not only slightly anchors into the middle, which is fine because, again, that's typically how you serve customers, but what it does is it really gets them to think about, well, what's really important for me and what's really important for my business? What do I really need in order to be successful with my trusted advisor? And so the three options there help to be able to guide the small business client to ultimately understand what services are really critical versus what they came in just asking for, because, again, they haven't necessarily thought through everything that they need. Now, once you've got those packages laid out, again, remember, you were doing it from an exhausted standpoint. You need to break it down into a categorized list. And so you want to figure out how to group these together into meaningful chunks or buckets. Because if you were to present to somebody your minimum was 20 services, your middle was 50 services, and your top end was 100 services. That's just too much. It's too much to be able to comprehend. And so you want to categorize that so that in the first bucket, there's maybe 4 to 6 categories. In the middle bucket, maybe 6 to 8. And then at the top end, maybe 8 to 10. And so you can quickly scan through as a prospect and know, well, this is what I'm getting here. This is what I'm adding on if I go up to the better model, and this is what I'm going to get at the best. And that gives you this framework to easily be able to have the conversation about what it means for each one of those buckets and what they're going to ultimately get to. And so again, this is part of the harder part of value pricing, so I spent a little bit more time on this. But again, remember the power of 3, start from the full list, break it down into the 3 options, and then summarize it so it's easy to digest. Now, following on a similar mantra, the power of 3 is now you've got to figure out, I've got my 3 packages now, how am I going to actually figure out what are the prices that I'm going to actually set for each one of these packages? And then what's the variability that I need to assume based upon each client I might have a conversation from? Now again, if you go to fixed fees versus value pricing, you're doing the same thing in step 3, and you're starting at the same point with step 4. So it's not going to deviate until we get to a little further down the path. The first thing, and Ron Baker talks about this in full agreement with it, is form a pricing committee. So if you're in a larger firm, this is probably a set of partners who are able to talk through, again, if you're looking at these bundles, what should be the set price based upon what we are seeing across the organization. It's also, when you're dealing with a client face-to-face, it's harder to have the pricing conversation if you don't feel like you've got, again, there's emotional attachment. You want to be able to sound that off with someone who isn't emotionally attached, the relationship that's being formed. And so that pricing committee is a really good way to keep you honest and also to feel like someone's got your back and you've thought it through quite well. For those of you that aren't in large firms, if you're by yourself, your pricing committee is your spouse. It's the person who's going to be most impacted by the fact that you underbid a client engagement that came in, because they're the ones that ultimately have to deal with the aftermath of that. And so they're not emotionally attached to the client, but they're definitely emotionally attached to the outcome. And so they don't need to know about value pricing. They don't need to know necessarily about the business at the same level of detail that you have. But it's for them to be able to be a sounding board to provide the questions to really probe in to see, did you think about this particular set of scenarios, or why did you come up with this particular piece? And they're going to probe and help you understand and make you think about things from a different perspective than what you already have. So again, pricing committee is important. You're going to use it here on setting the initial prices, and you're going to be using them on engagements as you go forward. The next is really understanding the costs and assumptions per bundle. What's really interesting is when I do these talks with folks individually, and I really press on the fact that, okay, this particular service stack, how much do you think it costs? And if I press on it, they can give me a relative cost of what it is. Is it exact? Maybe not, but it's pretty darn close. You know, when you look at a service bundle or a component of that, you roughly know what that's going to take on average. Now, each engagement is slightly different, but right now we're dealing with the averages here. For those of you that actually have project management systems and you're tracking things per hour and so forth, yeah, you can use that. But again, you're going to want to list out what your assumptions are. You're going to want to list out, what different things you're providing there, and then ultimately, trying to gravitate towards what the cost. Because you just want to have an understanding of relatively what this is going to take, because you're never going to be offering that price. You're going to be offering that price with obviously the markup on top. What is the value that you're going to want to get for what you're providing and what customers are going to perceive to be that value. And now what you're going to do based upon having that committee, having those costs and assumptions laid out, is you're going to develop 3 prices for each bundle. So you're creating this 3x3 matrix of prices across the 3 bundles that we've talked about. And the prices are really what I called here the BEI. The first one there is called the BATNA price. The next one is the expected price, and then the top one is the ideal price. So we're going to start with the BATNA, and that is a business management term, and it stands for Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. This is the price that if you and I were in a conversation, and you are the small business, and I'm the accounting professional, this is the price that if I was to present this with the bundle, would be the walk-away price. This is a threshold where both parties, if I'm the customer, I feel like I'm getting a great and fantastic deal, but I, as the accounting professional, feel like I am now crossing the threshold for where I am not making enough value on this engagement to move forward. It is not to say that that is the cost. It is what the value that you have to have from each engagement to make it meaningful and willing to take on. And so that can be a little bit variable, but the point is it's not just cost, it's cost plus whatever profit that you would ultimately have to make to be worth your time to spend on that. And so again, that's the BATNA price. On the complete opposite end of that is the ideal price. This is what Ron Baker would call the fist pump price. This is the price by which at the end of the day, a few customers will take it and you're going to say to yourself, yes, that is fantastic. I'm surprised a few people ever take this price, but this is my upper bound that someone would be willing to pay. Now, the expected price is what's sitting in between. You can just take the average of those two. You can take the average and then look at that and see if it's right and then move it either up or down based upon what you perceive your customers' willingness to pay would be. But that gives you a gauge of what relatively you should be setting the price at in terms of your head and your mental model as you go forward. At this point now, you've got those three prices tiered across three packages, and you need to think to yourself, am I going to do fixed fees or am I going to do value pricing? If you're going to do fixed fees, then basically what you're doing here is you're going to be choosing one of those three prices, most likely the expected, and that's going to be your starting point in conversations going forward on what your monthly servicing fees are going to be. And it can be adjusted based upon your clients and customers. If you're doing value pricing, what you've now created with that model is the range of prices that you'd be willing to accept that you're going to be working with in order for each customer or prospect that you're going to be dealing with face-to-face. And so that range is going to help you in terms of when someone picks a package, how to be able to gauge what the pricing is going to be for that. Now, once you've done that, and you've got your prices, you're going to do a dry run. You're going to go back to that pricing committee and you're going to present your packages and present the one price for each of those bundles. Again, it's probably your expected price across all three of those, and present the packages and present the actual prices and see kind of what conversation stems from that and if you feel comfortable with that pricing being set for those packages. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, it's power of threes. We're going to be setting up three prices to be able to get to what that expected price is, and then that price we're going to then be using as our mental model for each one of those packages as we go across. Okay? So we've gone through the two longest, hardest parts of the conversation for value pricing. Step 3, creating bundles. Step 4, setting initial prices. Again, this is before we've actually put this all into practice. And so the next step really is understanding the change management part of it, and so it's making the change. And what I want to do here is just, again, we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. Again, it's really important that yourself, your partners in your firm, and the entire organization are able to go on the journey of value pricing with you, because ultimately it takes the full buy-in of the firm to be successful. And this is why you wrote down your goals, you wrote down your timing beforehand, and your rationale. Why are you doing this? Because you're going to bring those back to life. And you're going to be using those to be able to articulate to each person that's, again, in that informed state, or whether or not they're contributing on the project, to remind them of why we're doing this and what the outcomes and what we're trying to achieve. Along this path, again, the reason why we did that model of having one person owning the project and working with others was to be able to have that cross-practice involvement. So those who are actually face-to-face with the clients to those who are partners, having a voice at the table to understand how to be able to do this and making sure all the different variables were considered in creating the models that we're going to be using going forward. I call this part the as-is and to-be. I'm a process guy, and so a lot of times it's documenting, well, what did we do before? What is an engagement that we did in an hourly-based billing model? How did that look? How did it transpire? What did we do? How did we do it? You want to be doing that anyways to be able to understand your processes as a firm and be able to iterate them over time. It's for a later conversation. But the 2B is, what are we going to be doing going forward? How does an engagement look in terms of how is it, our conversation from the prospect? How does that then stem to what we're going to present in terms of packages, the prices that we're going to do, and the involvement of the pricing committee, the signing of the paperwork, and how the engagement itself is going to happen in order to leverage the fact that we're now in this value pricing model where we need to be more proactive and we need to be delivering as fast as we can at the highest quality. Then it's about getting buy-in across the team. It's having the conversations with everybody to understand why we're doing this, understand objections, answer those questions. Doesn't necessarily mean that we need to solve all those questions, but we need to listen to them and be able to take an honest evaluation of them and see whether or not we need to change things because of that. Then it's ensuring that everyone's across the board adhering to it, using reminders, bringing back those goals, the rationale. Again, it's not just something you turn on and then you forget about it and move on. You got to continue to work at it, especially in those early days of putting this in practice. And the last thing, and this is the key with any change management project, is you need to celebrate. Celebrate when those goals are met. Your goals you want to have them short term and medium term. So that way, again, you want to have those small successes and those big successes, and take a moment and have everyone reflect about getting to that next stage and getting that sense of progression across this new foray. So that's step 5. Now step 6, we're putting this into practice. Remember, we talked before about which client are we going to work with first. Is it going to be a new client or a new prospect that comes along the way? Is an existing client that's pretty simple, it's routine, that has minimal variables that we need to deal with, that I've got a good relationship with? Or is it someone maybe I'm going to fire? But again, we're going to go and think about that one specific customer we're going to address first. And the first thing is do your homework. And that's if possible. Again, if it's a new client, you may not have the luxury of being able to do the research on their business, on who they are, on what they might be wanting, and so forth. But any homework that you can do helps you understand the perspective and the situation that that small business owner, that individual, is facing, so you can think about how to craft the packages, how to have the conversation, and ultimately be able to get to a meaningful, aligned set of goals for the project. Now, what I call here greet, meet, listen, and probe. In terms of whether it's a phone conversation, an in-person meeting, whatever it might be, that first sort of dive down into ultimately what is needed to be solved and how do we want to solve it. A lot of times folks will go ahead, hear quickly what's being said, and then here's what we do. Quickly spitting it right back to the small business owner, and then it's just a negotiation on price to ultimately get whatever that might be done. But the key here is you greet, say hi to the person, you get a little bit familiar with who they are, you start to build a little trust in the conversation, and then listen. Listen to understand what are they facing, what's their business about. Again, small business owners especially, and again, we're all small business owners on the call here, you love to talk about your business. It's your passion. It's what you wake up every day to do. And so leverage the fact of that to have them articulate, well, why are you in business? What are you doing? What's really important? What are your barriers right now? What are you trying to solve? What's limiting you? What are you trying to ultimately get to? What's your end goal for the business? 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. And so this probing conversation in terms of being able to pull out more and more information. And one of the ways to do that is this process called the 5 whys. You ask somebody, why are you trying to ultimately, solve this problem for your customers? And then they will tell you why. Or, they'll give you an answer. You go, well, why is that important? They'll give you some more detail. And in each one of those, you're pulling out a bit of what they've done in the response, and you're asking it back to them in the framing of a why question. And if you do that within 5 whys, you will ultimately get to the root underlying cause or the root behavior that's driving this particular outcome or goal or whatnot or barrier that they're facing. And so those 5 whys is a probing mechanism to really dig down deep and understand, okay, you've asked for bookkeeping services, but why do you really need bookkeeping services? What ultimately is driving that? What are you trying to do with your time? Or why has this become a problem now? Why wasn't it a problem before? And that helps you then to evaluate the scope. Well, what are we trying to solve? At what level of detail? And what ultimately is the pain that those people are facing, and how painful is it? Because that pain that you're able to alleviate is really the value conversation that you're going to have. And so you're trying to then, again, evaluate what they need, how they need it, in what time frame, and what you can ultimately do to be able to help them. Again, small business owners doing that conversation, you're evaluating and assessing it from the other side of the table. So that really goes to step 7, which is the value conversation. And again, this is one of the most critical pieces of the 10 steps. Step 3 and 4 is extremely critical, and step 7 is also extremely critical, because this is where all that comes into being in one place. You've got the context now, so now you've got to be able to tell the story and explain why what you're going to be presenting to them is going to solve the underlying problems that they have. And so the first thing to do here is retell what you heard. Recite what we've actually talked about to make sure that you've gauged it and understood it correctly. Then it's really determining together what success ultimately looks like. Okay, so you've asked for these particular services. This is what you're trying to achieve. This is going to ultimately deliver what for your business? This is ultimately going to provide you a peace of mind in what way? And if you can then create a sense of aligned goals, I can get you to where you want here based upon working with you in this capacity. Those aligned goals are what's going to set the tone, set the framework of what the engagement is that you're going to be able to provide that's going to deliver towards those goals or be a part of the journey to be able for that small business to be successful in the outcome that they've outlined. And so talking about, well, how is it to work with me ultimately as a trusted advisor? What ultimately are we ultimately going to be able to do? And so this is really setting the tone. This is really understanding, what ultimately, what's the process? What are the tools that we use? What is the conversation style or the communication? How we proactively? And in the context of that, what you're doing is you're selling your services. You're selling how it is to work with you in terms of your processes. You're selling your expertise. And again, it's much easier to do that conversation when it's in conjunction with what the small business owner is trying to ultimately accomplish and how you can ultimately, what you do ultimately can help them get to that goal. And so it's framing it into something that both it's easier for you to articulate, and it's very easy for them to understand. And the whole reason for doing this is you're instilling confidence that you're the person, your firm is the firm that's going to give them the highest likelihood to be able to get to that success point. And their understanding of how you come to the table and how what you do and how you do it is ultimately going to give them the lowest risk and the highest return, and again, the value that's ultimately brought together on that. And so again, this is the value conversation. And again, we haven't gotten to the point of even presenting what we do. We're talking about, again, how is a relationship with us going to work, and why is that relationship going to lead to the best outcomes for everybody? And that then gets to step 8, which is presenting your packages and pricing. So you've got the context, you've had the value conversation. This is where, again, if you have the time, and if you were to have a secondary meeting, you may tweak the packages that you have. But again, let's assume that you didn't have the time. You're going to be presenting the 3 packages that you had with the set expected prices that you may, again, in a value pricing model, you would be doing that on the spot using your gauge between your BATNA, your expected, and your ideal to set what that price might be. In a fixed fee model, you've already got them set, so you would just be presenting what the prices were with the packages that you'd already pre-canned. And so now you're presenting, based upon the conversation, a modified version of what are the different services that we can provide on a good, better, and best model, dictated by what you, Mr. Small or Mrs. Small Business Owner, are needing in order to be successful. And again, that middle one is that typical one, the one that most people use, and that's what you're talking about first. So you talk about that middle option first. You talk about then the smaller option, which is, basically most people don't do this, but at the bare minimum, this is what we can do, but it ultimately, you're going to have to do more work on your side, or this isn't going to give you the highest likelihood of success. And if you really want to go and do more with us, this is what the best model is that can ultimately deliver you fast results, or better engagement, more time back for you to do other things. And so you're going to then straight up recommend the right one for them. And typically that is the middle, but maybe on the conversation you've learned that maybe the smallest package is the right one for them. Again, you want to do what's right for the client. You don't want to force them into any particular one for your own purposes. You want to do what's right for them, because that's ultimately going to deliver best client satisfaction at the end of the day, and then ultimately possibly cross-sell or upsell opportunities for your business. If you have a chance, you want to check with your pricing committee on what prices that you're going to offer before you do that. Again, you may not have that flexibility. You then, again, have shown them the packages. You've talked to them about each one and why they're meaningful, and now you're going to present the price. But in the presenting of the price, you're also referencing the value that they're going to get. So it's not price independent. It's price in the context of that value conversation you were just having on why you're the best for this, why your processes are there, how that's going to deliver to those end goals that we stated before. And you're going to define what that engagement is and expectations about what you're going to provide and also what they need to do. Again, a lot of times it may be an outsourced model, and again, they have certain things they need to provide to you. And remember, they're part of your extended team. So if they're going to be doing activities, they need to act like one of your employees and provide it at the right quality, at the right timing. Otherwise, it's going to muck up the delivery dates and everything else. And again, there's a carrot and stick model you can do with that. And I talk about that a little later in the deep dives that we'll do on pricing and bundling. But again, you really want to define what that engagement is. And when you get to the point of signing and closing out that conversation into a working engagement, first thing to do is schedule that next meeting and give them a checklist of what they need to do to prep for that meeting. They probably won't do anything on that checklist, but again, you want to start the project in motion immediately upon the close of the engagement itself. Because again, a lot of times things will drag on, and that ultimately leads to doubts and other things. And then the next step is really be the trusted advisors. You guys know this, you do this. This is your bread and butter. This is nothing in here should be anything new. Again, you've now moved from a sales scenario to an engagement, so you need to transition that. In larger firms, you may have someone on the sales side. You may have, again, someone who owns the account. You may have a specific onboarder. But each one of those needs to have a proper baton pass, both people on the call in order to transition from state to state. Otherwise, the small business owner individual is confused on what's going on and who they're dealing with. Just like we did for this project, you need to set a goal and set a critical path for success. How are we going to get there? What are all the different pieces that we need? How can we get this engagement to be routine? Lay that down very clearly and understanding who's got what components to be able to provide. And that goes back to those deadlines, carrot and stick. Here's what you need to provide. If you provide this on time or early, then we can move this project along even faster. If you're late, then it may come into a change fee, or there may be other penalties that happen there, not just that the project's delayed. Again, they need to understand what sort of complications they can introduce. Next big one is you've got to train the client. So important. If you're going to have someone be an extended part of your staff, again, that's what these small business owners in a lot of cases are, train them for success for what they've got to do. If they're going to be owning the reconciliation process, again, when you're talking about the bookkeeping, train them how to do it, even if they say they know how. Don't assume that they know everything. Assume that they don't, again, because it also looks like you're going the extra mile for them, and they can say, yeah, I do know that, and you can back off. But again, don't assume that they do know. Over-communicate. Folks, a lot of folks forget this. Over-communication is great because it shows proactiveness. It shows that you're involved. It shows that you care, and again, that really substantiates the value that they're paying overall. And that goes to the next piece, which is proactive in the relationship. Again, especially in those early few weeks, that first month, be proactive, reach out, give advice, check in, see how things are going. Don't just assume everything is going well. Again, they're going to be nervous to reach out at times, so you go ahead and do that extra step. And then at the end of the day, you got to get the work done. It's got to be on time, it's got to be of high quality, because that's substantiating the value that they're paying for, and they're going to be happy to pay that particular price, because you've ultimately delivered what you said you were going to deliver at the beginning of the day. And so again, that getting the work done and delivering, at least delivering at what was stated, if not a little bit over, ultimately leads to the recurring work and also the referrals that we all are desperately seeking to get. And that goes to the last piece, which is really the iteration of it all. At the end of each one of these projects, or even at different steps or toll gates along the way, dedicate time for what's called an after-action review. This can be as little as 15 minutes. It can be no more than an hour. But what it is the team that was involved takes a step back and evaluates what was successful, what worked, what didn't, what needs to change. And so that way you can take that back to the organization overall, to the practice overall, and be able to change maybe what's been done in terms of the packages, the pricing, the communication, the value conversation, all those sort of things, so that way you constantly are improving what you do. So that goes back to the second point: what worked, what didn't, what was learned. Make those improvements. Don't wait. Make them as soon as you know that you've got enough data to be able to prove that you've got to do something differently. And then you got to communicate. Again, over-communicate. Communicate what was found. Again, it's if something didn't go the right way, first time, it's fine. It's a lesson learned. Second time, if you're doing the same thing, now you're getting into some problems. But communicate what was found so you don't repeat them. And again, it really goes into, if you're in larger practice, you got to foster that continuous improvement. Get a culture of that, because that's ultimately what's going to be able to have you dial in better and better in terms of setting the prices and the packages and getting the best value for yourself and for your clients overall. So, again, I said this is going to be a pretty full talk, and it is. So I know that Stuart's been out there answering some questions, and again, we're gonna now try to wrap this up in a nice little bow. So, what are the summary and the key takeaways? So again, I've put up here the 10 steps to value pricing. Again, we have research, get the plan, build the packages, set the prices, do the change management journey, assess the client, then have that value conversation before you present. Present the packages first, then the prices. Get the work done as the trusted advisor, and then iterate on the process in order to make sure that this is getting dialed in better and better each time. And so the top key takeaways are, first is research. Go watch The Value of Puppies by Jason Bloomer if you haven't, and if you're new to the subject matter. And if you're a little bit more than just new, then go pick up that Pricing on Purpose by Ron Baker. Good assets to really just kind of get you going down the path. Setup. Again, I talked about this power of threes. Again, you're going to be, in terms of getting the bundles, you're going to try to create the 3 bundles: good, better, best, starting with a comprehensive list and working your way, bringing it down to a categorized list. Pricing, again, you're going to create 3 prices per each bundle, so that way you can figure out what that expected price is going to be overall. Putting into practice, again, identifying who's going to be the first one you're going to go out with and have the conversation. And again, that value conversation is the critical piece. So start thinking about that in terms of start from the value conversation before you're actually talking about the work and the price and so forth. Learn, really, really important. Again, you need to understand what you may have left on the table, or how you could have approached the conversation differently to get better outcomes each and every time. And so don't settle for, it worked, but have that constant sense of how do I make this better and better each and every time. And that leads to that iterate part of the journey overall. So a little bit of housekeeping here before we move on to maybe a few questions is upcoming webinar series in February. Again, it's about value pricing. We're going to have a pre-recorded panel discussion at the end of February, and it's really, we got a fantastic panel of what looks like 4 experts in it. And they're going to talk about the journey, again, they're practitioners, so they can talk to you about what to expect and what they've faced along the way, and some nuggets of gold in terms of advice. And then also, we're going to put up some content on bundling and pricing strategies in depth, and also that value conversation, so they're so critical. In March, I'll be back on here on March 9th. Again, go to the Firm of Future to sign up, but we're going to really talk about practice improvement and practice efficiency. So we're going to be talking about that in terms of context of your email, your clients, and your team. And then again, we've got another panel discussion at the end of that end of March, as well as some good content around onboarding, managing email, client communications, and visibility, and so forth. So some great stuff coming up here. Check that out at firmofthefuture.com. Again, check back as often. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the website was just recently updated. It looks fantastic. There's a lot of really good tools and stuff there already. And the Intuit team is working hard to provide a lot more content and a lot more great information for you to be able to improve what you do and ultimately provide the best service to your clients. Now, I'm not shy from the topic. Again, I want to be able to say thank you. First of all, my contact information is up here. Again, I'm from Carbon. If you want to learn more about Carbon, go to carbonhq.com. But my email is up there, ian@carbonhq.com. My cell phone's there as well, so you can call me as well. Just note that I do have a family, so a call at 2 in the morning Pacific time is not really the best time to chat. But again, if you need me, I'm there. And then we only have about a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and look here at the questions. But before I do that, I think it's time for us to launch that CPE keyword for those of you out there. Again, remember at that 20, 30-minute mark, I put up that keyword of the day for you to get CPE. And again, is it Australia, Asia, Europe, Antarctica, or Africa? Again, I'm going to keep that up here as we go. Make sure you answer that if you want CPE. And a couple questions that came up, and I'll just do these in rapid fire. Someone asked, I couldn't understand what the B stood for in BEI. Again, those are the three prices. BATNA is what the B stands for, and that is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. That is the price by which both parties in a negotiation would walk away from the table. And so you've hit the point where you're offering a price that you aren't making money from, or you're not making enough money to make the engagement reasonable. And for the person, the client that you're dealing with, that is the point by which they're getting the best deal on the planet, and it's below whatever they're going to get elsewhere. And so for you, the BATNA is your walk-away price. The last one here is, what does MTO stand for? It's minimum, typical, and open-ended. So again, it's the minimum amount of services you provide, the average or typical, and then the a la carte full open menu list overall. And then the last one I'll answer here is, again, was around BATNA. I just defined that, so we got that one covered as well. Again, we're now here at the end of the hour. Just to go back here real quick. Oops, there's my information again if you need it. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. Appreciate your time today. Go to www.firmofthefuture.com to be able to see this and other recordings from Intuit. Appreciate your time. Have a good one.